This week is Parshas Mikeitz, and it's also, of course, the festival of Hanukkah. In fact, almost every single year, the festival of Hanukkah falls out during the week of Parshas Mikeitz, where we read the story of Joseph, and he's in Egypt, and he starts off the Parsha. He's languishing in a pit. He is imprisoned for a crime that he is innocent of, and he was there for already a decade, and then 2 more years were tacked on when he failed to properly rely on God and instead relied on the butler for too much. And then, in one instant, he was catapulted from that awful darkness into brilliant light. There are many, many connections between our Parsha and the festival of Hanukkah, and our sages find many textual references to the festival. But maybe this is another idea, another lesson, another Hanukkah lesson in our story. It's a story of darkness. We know that the Greeks, they are portrayed in the Torah as a kingdom of darkness, even though they had a lot of culture and a lot of apparent vibrancy and light. But from a spiritual perspective, it was dark. And that one little flicker of light, that little bit of light that emanated from the temple, from the restored and re-inaugurated temple, that banished a whole lot of darkness. Joseph began the Parsha in total darkness. And out of nowhere emerged a brilliant flash, beacon of light. As you know, this was a difficult week for our people. There was a real terrible attack in Australia, of all places. They targeted the Jews celebrating Hanukkah in the awful, barbaric, violent attack. You think about what animates someone to do that, the father and son. Like what are we going to do? We're going to watch the game? We'll go bowling? No, let's try to kill as many Jews as possible. They're celebrating Hanukkah. It's just an awful, just to think, where does such a sadistic worldview come from? But putting that aside, just there's so much pain. It's a very tight-knit community, I learned, in Australia. And all Australian Jews, they know someone who was there or was involved or, God forbid, was injured or killed. So it's a real sad week for our people, a dark week. And many people were injured, and we hope and pray that they have a full recovery and they don't have any lingering effects. And the Almighty should comfort those who lost loved ones, who lost relatives and friends. And we hope that just as in our Parsha and as in the story of Hanukkah, there was such darkness that blanketed the whole world, but there was salvation, there was redemption, there was hope that emerged. Happened to Joseph, it happened to our people in the times of Hanukkah, and please, it will happen to our nation, and especially the people who are suffering today. Parshas Mikeitz is the middle installment of the Joseph saga. Joseph is still languishing in the pit. He's been in prison now for 12 years for the alleged crime of attempted assault on Mrs. Potiphar. And 2 years prior, Joseph had some cellmates, the butler and the baker. And indeed, the baker was beheaded, as foretold in his dream, as interpreted skillfully by Joseph. And the butler was reinstated. And when the butler was restored to Pharaoh's good graces, he forgot about Joseph. Joseph remained in the pit. For those of you keeping track, this is the 2nd time that Joseph was in a pit. In last week's Parsha Vayeshev, when he comes to check up on the brothers, they were entertaining to kill him, but instead of doing that, they divested him. They divested him of his garment, and they threw him into a pit filled with snakes and scorpions. And he's removed from the pit only to be sold as a slave. And now, after being accused of assaulting Miss Potiphar, he's once again thrown into a pit, and this time he's there for 12 years. And now it's 2 years later. It's 12 years after the initial incarceration. And Pharaoh has a set of very disturbing dreams. In the first dream, he sees 7 fat, plump, hefty, and healthy cows, they're consumed by 7 skinny cows. And then he says, and then he sees 7 robust heirs of wheat swallowed by 7 withered, weather-beaten ones. And Pharaoh woke up extremely disturbed. According to our sources, the verse tells us that Pharaoh was dreaming, and if you read the verse very carefully, it indicates that Pharaoh actually had a recurring dream, the same set of dreams, each night for 2 years. Moreover, our sages tell us that when Pharaoh had the dreams, he also had the interpretations. But each morning, for 2 years, he woke up and he forgot it. And finally, 2 years after the events of last week's Parsha, Pharaoh remembered the dreams. But he forgot the interpretations. And the Midrash tells us that Pharaoh was so bothered, so distraught by these dreams, he was on the edge of dying out of the fear, out of the trepidation. So he summons all of his necromancers, all of his gurus, all of the wise people to interpret the dreams. And none of them does it satisfactorily. You'll have 7 daughters and they'll all die. Pharaoh knows that's not it. He doesn't quite remember the interpretation, but he knows that that's not it. You'll conquer 7 countries and then you lose them. That's not it. Pharaoh is agitated. And present, one of the ministers of Egypt is, of course, the Sar Hamashkim, the butler. And he tells Pharaoh, when I was in the pokey, when I was in the slammer, there was this kid, this Hebrew youth, a slave, and he interpreted my dream and the baker's dream. Maybe he can help you, O Pharaoh. Rashi points out that this butler is rotten to the core. He doesn't want to help Joseph. Joseph helped him. He doesn't want to help Joseph. He forgets Joseph. He doesn't remember Joseph. And now it's to his advantage to invoke Joseph. So he helps Joseph out, but he's cursed, Rashi tells us. Because even when he does something good, it's not complete. He has a whole string of pejoratives for Joseph. He's a nar. He's a youth. He's immature. He's not worthy of greatness. He's a Hebrew. He doesn't even speak our language. He's a foreigner. He's an outsider. You can't rely on him. He's a slave. And in Egypt, there was a law on the books that a slave can never rule, can never don the garments of a minister. The butler knew good and well just how talented and how charismatic and how gifted Joseph was. And he knew right away, Pharaoh sees him, he's going to be entranced by Joseph. And he's trying to throw in all these doubters. He's a nar, he's a youth, he's a Hebrew, he's not reliable, he's a slave. He doesn't want Pharaoh to take him as a prime minister. Pharaoh summons Joseph. They hustle him out of the pit. They give him a haircut. You imagine he didn't get a haircut for maybe 12 years. He didn't take a decent shower in a long time. You imagine what he looked like. They change his garments, and he's in front of Pharaoh. And it's an amazing verse. The commentaries all observe that it took one verse to get Joseph out of prison, out of the pit, and all groomed and well-coiffed and standing in front of Pharaoh. He catapulted from the lowest of lows to the highest of highs almost instantly. And that's symbolic of redemption. The redemption of God is like the batting of an eye. When you blink, you don't even notice it. It's so seamless. There's no lag. You just see straight. The transition from exile, from servitude, from being in the pit to redemption, to having the crown on your head, it happens in a flash. And it's very interesting to examine what happened by this fateful encounter of Pharaoh and Joseph. Pharaoh tells Joseph, Chalom chalamti, a dream I have dreamt. Ufosere no so, and there's no interpreter who can interpret these dreams. And I heard a rumor. A little birdie told me something. You are a gifted dream interpreter. Now, Joseph hasn't spoken yet. The first word that he says, the first word that he utters in more than a decade out of prison is the word, no, it's not true. Biladai, you heard fake news. Pharaoh's dangling freedom to Joseph. Not just freedom, potentially much more. The butler knew just how powerful Joseph was and how charismatic and gifted he was. And Pharaoh's like, oh, I heard that you're very talented. Maybe you can help me. And of course, if you can help me, I'll certainly help you. And the first thing he says is, no, it's not true. The wisdom is not mine. Only God can help you. And maybe God will help me help you, but I have no special power. Joseph was very subtly brought before Pharaoh. And he had the presence of mind to disclaim any argument, any claim of great aptitude. I have no wisdom. It's all from God. This is an amazing portrait of real instinctive faith. For 12 years, Joseph's been in probably the most inhuman circumstances and conditions. The squalor that he was in is probably unimaginable. This is not a nice prison in the Western world. You imagine just the pit with the snakes and scorpions might have been just about the same as the other pit. Certainly there were rats and mice and awful food and no place to relieve yourself. And 13 years after he left his family, and 12 years since he was imprisoned, and all this terrible events that happened to him, he has the presence of mind to instinctively say, no, I have nothing. It's all from God. And this is his first word. It's almost like a test that Joseph had. Will he exhibit faith after all these long years? Biladai, it's not me. And Pharaoh relates his dreams. The cows, the ears of grain, and Joseph tells Pharaoh, it's only one dream. You have two dreams, but it's only one dream. And God is telling you via a prophetic dream what his plans are. The 7 cows, the 7 ears of wheat, they correspond to 7 years. 7 years of unprecedented plenty, abundance will be followed by 7 years of brutal, crippling famine. And Joseph adds, very important, why did you have 2 dreams? It's 2 dreams with the same message, the same overall message. 7 good years followed by 7 awful years. The reason why they were doubled, that's to tell you the timeline. When God gives you a dream, that's prophetic, and he does it twice, that's a sign that this will happen now. It will happen immediately. And then Joseph transitions to advisor. You must appoint a wise, insightful man to oversee the national preparation effort to stockpile during the years of plenty and to prepare for the apocalyptic famine set to arrive afterwards. Joseph finishes his interpretation, and Pharaoh says, you are the man. He gives him the keys to the kingdom, his ring. He puts on the clothes of royalty. He gives him a new name, Tzafnas Paneach, which means the person who decrypts, who deciphers the encrypted, the riddle. He gives him a wife, Asnas, daughter of Potiphar. That's a nice little twist in the story. Potiphar and Mrs. Potiphar, his master, And his accuser, their daughter, is actually his wife. As it is tell us. Mrs. Potiphar actually had a prophetic premonition that she's going to have descendants with Joseph. And she was right. But she thought it was her. Truthfully, it was her daughter. And at the end of the day, Joseph is paraded throughout the cities of Egypt. And they're announcing, they're crying before him, Avrech. He's an Av, he's a father, he's a master of wisdom. But he's Rach, he is tender, he is young in years. And everyone congregates to see him. And the girls, they climb atop the ramparts to crane their neck to catch a glimpse of this young wunderkind, this phenom. A pretty eventful day. He woke up in the morning in the pits, literally, and he went to sleep in the palace. We call this acing. He aced the interview. Not only did he completely interpret the dreams in a satisfactory manner, it was in the exact manner that Pharaoh himself had dreamt about, because he got the interpretation with the dream. He just forgot it. And he also outlined a clear, cogent, logical plan for how to prepare. And the commentaries talk about Joseph maybe overstepping his mandate. He offers this unsolicited advice. You were hired to interpret the dreams, not to make suggestions. A very interesting comment in the Sforno. The Sforno says that Joseph was interpreting the dreams. And part of the interpretation of the dreams is the recognition that God is telling you this for a reason. He wants you to act. Why is God taking you backstage? Why is he giving you some inside info? Why is he telling you about the future? It's not just to satisfy your curiosity. He's telling it to you because he wants you to do something about it. And therefore, it's part of the dream interpretation is to take steps to actualize those dreams, to implement those dreams. And it's interesting because Joseph himself, he too believed that there's a role for the person who receives the prophetic dream to play. God told him, okay, you'll be a king, right? You'll have those bundles, they'll be bowing down before you. And you have the sun and the moon and the 11 stars, they're bowing before you. Joseph was a king in Egypt for 7 years before there was the famine. And he never sent a messenger to Jacob or to his family. All's well. Forgive me for not writing sooner. I'm here. I'm in Egypt. I'm a king. You don't need to worry about me. He doesn't send that message. Why not? He waits. He waits until his brothers show up when everyone else shows up to get grain. Why? Because he had a dream and he understood that he has a role to play, and his role is to say, okay, the brothers, they should come and they should bow before me. And that's the role that I have to play to actualize the dreams. Either way, Joseph gets the nod. He gets the nod from Pharaoh. You want a wise man? You want a ish chacham v'navon, a wise, insightful man? There's no one better than Joseph. Now the commentaries ask a sharp, nuanced question. Joseph was very precise in what he says. Pharaoh, we have 7 years of plenty to prepare for the 7 years of famine. You need a wise, insightful person. Why is the right set of skills, wisdom? If Joseph said, well, we need an industrious man. We need a well-organized man. We need a gifted quartermaster. That made sense. You got to prepare, you got to organize, you got to stockpile, you got to make a plan, keep a ledger. Why is the right person for the job someone who is wise? And the great Musar masters share a very powerful idea. During these years of plenty, there was such abundance, unprecedented abundance. And what happens when someone has so much, way more than they need? And the verse actually tells us there was grain like sand. There was grain like grains of sand. Endless, innumerable stockpiles of grain. When there's so much, you can't possibly in your mind, or it's not likely for someone in their mind, to even consider the fact that there could be a period of austerity very soon. And it's hard to value the grain. You have so much of it. To treat every bit of grain as something valuable that's life-saving. When you're starving and you have one little stalk of grain, it's like that's all you can think about. When you're awash in an endless surplus of grain, it's hard to have that same value towards every single stalk of grain. It's not enough to have a quartermaster, to have an industrious person. You need a person who's wise. The definition of wise, Ezehu Chacham, who's the wise one? Haroeh es hanod, who sees what is yet to be born, who can envision the future, and could act now based upon the future. Now there's abundance, but in 7 years, okay, now it's 6 years, now it's 5 years, in 4 years, the biggest bull market, a boom market. Only the wise person is able to think about the future. And that's why it's important to have a wise person. Because he is able to envision a different future. A future where you'll really, really need every little bit of that grain, of that excess. And the Musar masters add that each one of us plays the role of Joseph. Do you know why? We all have 7 years of plenty, of abundance, followed by bitter famine. Because we're alive. And to be alive is to have opportunities to do mitzvos. And there's endless opportunities. You can do mitzvos all day and all night. And each one of them is worth billions. It's infinite value. And there'll come a point in time where every one of us, forgive me for being the bearer of bad news, don't shoot the messenger. Each one of us will reach a point in time in our life where there's famine. You can only live on what you stockpiled in the past. And only a wise person, when there's so much, only a wise person is thinking about the future. I was thinking this morning, so now it's Hanukkah, right? So it's a longer prayer service. We have the Hallel, we have the reading for the Torah. And people get antsy, you get antsy. You have to take the kids to school. You got to go to work. You got to eat your breakfast. The people have a busy day, and it's a longer prayer. So some people leave a little bit early. They go to the antechamber of the shul, and they start wrapping up their tefillin and putting away their talis. But in the shul, they're still saying the Kaddish. They're still saying the blessings that you have the opportunity to say Amen. You have the opportunity to say Amen Yesh Me'Rabba Mevarach L'Alma Me'al Mayo. Our sages tell us that there's different responses that the congregation says. And our sages calculated that to say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmo, blessed is he and blessed is his name, to say that once, to sanctify the name of God, to bless the name of God, and to do it once, the entire world is worth it. So that one Jew, one time, says that one blessing of Baruch Hu or Baruch Shmo. Blessed is he and blessed is his name. And one time that a person gets to say Amen and have a declaration of faith, that's worth more than 1,000 times Baruch Hu Baruch Shmo. And one Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach L'Alma Me'al Maya, that part of the Kaddish, one of the parts of the congregation responds, that's worth 1,000 amens, and thus 1,000,000 Baruch Hu Baruch Shmos. I see people, like there's Kaddish inside, and they're outside wrapping up the tefillin. So even if you do that, you got to open the door so you can listen in and say amen when everyone else is saying amen. Why don't they do that? Because there's so much abundance. Now, again, I'm not saying that I'm perfect, okay? So I'm with them. I'm one of those, okay? There's so much abundance. It's hard to think that there'll be a point in our life, in our existence, in our extended life, right? Where we'll cherish the smallest mitzvah and we'll yearn and we'll pine for it and we'll desire it so much. And we won't have it. Only what we stockpile now, only that you can take. Indeed. You need a wise person. And hopefully we'll be wise with our years of plenty. Joseph was wise. Pharaoh knew it. And Pharaoh promoted him. Joseph, former slave, is now viceroy of Egypt. Joseph's own dreams, they're starting to take shape. And he begins the stockpiling effort. He's amassing grain as the sand of the seas. Vayitzbar Yosef, and he amassed grain to such a degree that there's no more numbers. The numbers expired. After hundreds, you have thousands, and then millions, and then billions, and then trillions, and then septillions, and a one with 100 zeros. But then I heard that there's something called a Googleplex, which is a Googles. Okay, there's still a number for that. Even more than that. That's how much grain he amassed. And over the course of these years of plenty, he married Asnas, as we mentioned, 2 sons, Menashe and Ephraim. And finally, after 7 years of plenty, 7 years of assiduous preparation, the years of famine begin. And there's no bread, and there's no grain, and there's no produce everywhere. Everywhere besides for the land of Egypt. In effect, the entire world was relying on Joseph. The entire world was sustained by Joseph. He was the great benefactor of them all. We mentioned last week that Joseph's betrayal by his brothers, that's all part of a big plan, a deep plan. The Eitza Amutra, the deep plan. Jacob sent Joseph away from the depths of Hebron. There's no depths in Hebron. It's part of the deep plan. God is manipulating circumstances to bring about the plan foretold to Abraham, to bring the Jews down to Egypt. Part of that prophecy in Genesis chapter 15 by the covenant of the parts. Part of the prophecy is Va'achar Kain, and afterwards they'll leave with great wealth. This is part of the great wealth stage. The whole world needs food, and they all have only one place to find it. And they got to pay top dollar. So all the world's money is coalescing in Egypt. And of course, the end state of that is that when the nation leaves, hundreds of years later, they're going to leave with a big chunk of all that wealth. The people are hungry. In Egypt, they're hungry. Outside of Egypt, they're hungry. And they want food. And there's lots of food here. They go to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says, don't go to me. Go to Joseph. And whatever he tells you to do, you must do. Now, there's a few very interesting Rashis here. Rashi comments in this verse. Why is the whole land of Egypt starving? Didn't they prepare? So Rashi says that, yeah, everyone prepared in Egypt. Everyone had abundance. But all the other crops spoiled. Only Joseph's crops did not spoil. So everyone prepared, but he was the only one whose preparation mattered, whose preparation endured. And they went to Pharaoh because they didn't want to go to Joseph. Rashi tells us, Pharaoh told the Egyptians, whatever he tells you to do, you have to do. It's implied that he had some pretty big demands of the people. Rashi tells us, Joseph said, I'm not giving you food. I'm not giving you food. You have to circumcise. and said, circumcise? We don't want to circumcise. They went to Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, no, whatever Joseph tells you to do, whatever he tells you to do, as unpleasant as it may be. Joseph had a precondition. You want food? Sure. I'll give you food. Bread for circumcision. It's like cash for clunkers, right? Bread for circumcision. We had Joseph's brothers. They circumcised the men of Shechem. Joseph circumcised the men of Egypt. What are you going to do, right? Even if you don't want that. I'm kind of scared of scalpels. Sure. But if the alternative is starvation, they all agreed. All of Egypt was circumcised. And it's a major discussion amongst all the commentaries. Why? Like, why is Joseph doing this? Why is he demanding circumcision? It's a very fascinating question, and the commentaries all address it, and we'll maybe share an idea in just a little bit. Finally, the famine hits Canaan, and Jacob tells his sons, there's food, there are provisions in Egypt. Even though at that time, Rashi tells us, Jacob and his family, they had enough provisions. They had food still. Nevertheless, he told his sons, we should not show off. We should not show ourselves as if we're better. Everyone's going down to Egypt to get food. We will join the masses. Don't flaunt the fact you still have food. Pretend you need food and join the throngs descending to Egypt. So Jacob took his 10 sons and sent them to Egypt. 10 sons, wait a minute. 10 sons, doesn't Jacob have 12 sons? Yes, but one of them is Joseph, and he's already in Egypt, and one of them is Benjamin, and Benjamin's too precious. He's the youngest one. I'm not going to send him, says Jacob. It's too dangerous. His mother died while traveling. I don't want to send Benjamin down to Egypt. And finally, let the games begin. The brothers, they go into Egypt. They enter in 10 different gates. Why? Why don't they enter all as one? Very interesting. These were 10 exceptional men. Strong, handsome, gifted in every way. And there was a concern that maybe they'll be subjected to Ayin Hara, to the evil eye. If they all come together as this big pack, it's too much of an attention draw. Enter in 10 different entrances. And they come before Joseph. And Joseph sees his brothers. And they're bowing before him, as foretold in the dream. Benjamin's not there. Where's Benjamin? Joseph sees them. He recognizes them. They don't recognize him. They don't recognize him. For one reason, Rashi tells us, because he had a beard now, but primarily because they never imagined that Joseph was capable of such amazing greatness. The Midrash tells us that they were looking for Joseph, and they went to the taverns and the brothels, all the places where the lowlives hang out. Why? Because that's where he's expected to find Joseph. They never imagined that the slave that they sold to Egypt at 17, that young, infantile, immature, childish lad who fiddled with his hair would ascend to the absolute peak in a foreign land. He accuses them of being spies. Why'd you enter from 10 different entrances? No. We're brothers. It's really 12 of us. One's missing and one's at home. Yeah? I want to see the one that's at home. He puts him in prison for 3 days. He demands that they bring Benjamin down. He takes Shimon as a hostage. I'm not returning him until you bring Benjamin back. He slips their money back into their satchels. He's playing games with them. And Hashem tells us he's doing all of this to A, give them forgiveness, and B, to inspect them. Are they still hostile to their own brothers? They return to Jacob, Only 9 sons return. Shimon's still there. They tell him the story, and Jacob is apoplectic about it. Why'd you tell him about Benjamin? Are we supposed to know that he's going to demand to see him? Jacob categorically refuses to send Benjamin. And Reuben says, I'll protect him. And Judah says, I'll take responsibility. Eventually, the famine is so bad, Jacob agrees to send Benjamin. They meet Joseph again. He apparently treats them nicely. They dine together. And then he pulls this incredible little trick out of his hat. He tells his people, give them back their money in their satchels. Let's keep on playing with them. And take my special goblet, the goblet that I pretend to divine from. He would clink his goblet. Reuven, you must be the oldest one. You sit over here. Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar. Oh, really? Done. Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Yisachar's old. He lines them up by age. He's able to divine. How does he do that? Through his goblet. This special goblet, it's gone. It's missing. It was taken by Benjamin. It was really put in there by Joseph to inspect him. Are they going to defend him? Are they going to throw him under the bus like they did to Joseph himself? The Parsha ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. Benjamin is taken by Joseph, and everyone heads back to Egypt, absolutely dejected. And of course, the saga of Joseph will remain unresolved for another week. That's the Parsha. Let's go a bit backstage. And we'll start with a sharp question. Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. God's telling you his plans. Both dreams are really one dream. There's 7 years of plenty, of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. By 7 years of crippling hunger. And Joseph adds another point. The dreams were repeated. That's telling you the timeline. The fact that the same theme of years of plenty followed by years of famine, it was repeated in 2 dreams, that indicates that it's immediate. It will happen rapidly. It's imminent. These dreams are going to be implemented right away. Joseph is revealing to us it's a lesson in dream interpretation. A dream whose theme is repeated in a second dream, that indicates that the events foretold in the dream are imminent. Now, there's a major problem with this idea. This comes from the school of Joseph, the greatest dream interpreter in the Torah. This is Joseph. He did it for the butler and the baker and Pharaoh. He's a maestro of dream interpretation. And he tells us, if you have the same dream twice, it's happening right away. Pharaoh, the 7 years of plenty are happening now, and the 7 years of famine will follow immediately afterwards. Wait, Pharaoh was not the only one who had prophetic dreams. Joseph himself, he had prophetic dreams foretelling his rise to the kingship. Bundles bowing before you. That's dream 1. The sun, the moon, 11 stars bowing to you. Dream 2, 2 dreams telling us that Joseph will be king. Well, how old was Joseph when that happened, when those dreams happened? He was 17. The verse tells us explicitly in the beginning of last week's Parsha. Were those true dreams or not true dreams? Those were prophetic dreams, as indeed all dreams in Genesis are. Joseph did become a king. When? When he was 30. 13 years after the double dreams foretelling his ascent to kingship. How can Joseph say that when a dream is doubled, it indicates immediacy, when there are 13 long and difficult and challenging years separating his twin dreams from their actualization? There's a very profound idea here. It's one of those ideas that spins the whole parsha on its head, really the whole story on its head. Joseph gives us a rule. When a dream is doubled, it's implemented immediately. Joseph's own dreams. You will be a king were implemented immediately. How were they implemented? Wait a minute, there's 13 years. He's hated by his brothers. They can't say anything positive about him. He gets betrayed by them. Should we kill him? Should we throw him into the pit? Should we sell him as a slave? He's a slave for the Potiphars for a year. He's propositioned by Mrs. Potiphar. He's accused of the crime. He's sent into the slammer. He's there for 10 years until he meets the baker and the butler. 2 more years. That's not immediate. What the Torah is telling us, what Joseph is telling us, is that Joseph began his ascent to the monarchy immediately after those dreams. It was an immediate coronation, but it took 13 long years for it to be fully actualized. Joseph's 13 years started in a pit. Oh, and they ended in a pit as well. He started off in a pit full of snakes and scorpions. Welcome to the monarchy, Mr. Joseph. I hope you enjoy your stay. Joseph's monarchy began in a pit, teeming with snakes and scorpions. 13 years later, he's still in a pit, in the dungeon of Egypt. And everything that happened from pit to pit, everything in the interim, was all part of a continuous process to prepare to prime Joseph for kingship. Yes, it was immediate. What began was a 13-year process. It began immediately. There's a fascinating midrash. Remember the pits, right? We have the pit in Egypt, the jail, if you will. And we have the first pit back in Canaan. He thought they were in Shechem. No, they're in Dosan, says the man / angel Gabriel. He goes to Dosan. They're there. Here comes Joseph. Let's kill him. Reuben says, no, let's not kill him. Let's throw him into the pit. And they throw him into the pit. We know that Joseph died in Egypt. But there was one time that Joseph left Egypt after, of course, he was king, went back to Canaan before going back to Egypt. And of course, that's when they buried Jacob, the end of Genesis. And Joseph, we're told in the Midrash, he made another pit stop. He went back to the pit, the original one where this all got started. And Midrash, the context of this is, after Jacob died, the brothers were worried that maybe Joseph harbored still some enmity towards them. And this is chapter 50, verse 15. The brothers saw that their father died, and they said, well, maybe Joseph will mistreat us now. Maybe he'll repay us. He'll get revenge for all that we did to him. So they go to Joseph, and they tell him, your father, i.e. Jacob, our father, he commanded the following message before he died. And he said, go tell Joseph to forgive his brothers. And Joseph, when he heard that, he started crying. And the verse continues, that the brothers came, and they fell on their faces. And they said, we'll be your slaves. They're worried that Joseph still has in his heart some negative feelings towards them. And Joseph mollifies them. He calms them down. He comforts them. Al tiro, don't be scared. Am I in place of God? You maybe had nefarious plans for me, but God, Elokim chashva latova, he had a good plan. And he wanted me to be right where I am right now. He wanted me to give life to this large nation. And now don't worry, I'll sustain you, I'll take care of you, you and your children. And he comforted them. And he comforted them. And he spoke to their heart. What prompted the brothers to think that Joseph was still mad at them? So the Midrash tells us that when they went to the funeral in Canaan, Joseph made a pit stop back to that original pit, the one filled with snakes and scorpions. And the brothers see that. Oh no, he didn't forget what happened to him. He remembers the exact spot where we did the unconscionable, dastardly deed to him. Stripped him naked off of his garments. Threw him into the pit. And we ignored his pleading. And we sold him as a slave. He didn't forget that. Oh no. We better go and fabricate the story. Jacob told us to forgive you and we'll be your slaves. When they saw Joseph going back to the pit, they thought that he was still upset. He was enraged still. The truth is, Joseph was going to the pit for a different reason. He was going to thank God. To thank God about what had happened to him. He was going to celebrate what had happened to him. He wasn't there to foment more hatred towards his brothers. It was to remind himself about how fortunate he was to be thrown to that pit. Joseph realized that that's where his ascent began. That's where his kingship started. We mentioned this in the past. The Torah tells us that the cargo that the caravan was taking down to Egypt, it had fragrance. Typically, such cargoes traveling down to Egypt would carry foul-smelling, effluvious items. But it was carrying perfume, fragrance. And the commentators always say, well, why is it so important? Imagine you're in chains and you're just betrayed by your own family and you're being sent. You're a teenager, right? You're 17 years old. You're being sent out to Egypt as a slave. Are you really thinking about the fragrance? In the eyes of God. And subsequently, in the eyes of Joseph. And this is the bachelor that we get to see. Joseph wasn't descending to become a slave. Yeah, temporarily he was put on some sort of track. But all that is a preparation to become a king. And this is almost like his descent or his ascent to kingship. And it's very appropriate to have something fragrant to mark the occasion. He gets to Egypt. And in his eyes, and maybe the eyes of the bystanders, he's being treated like a slave. But in truth, this is all part of his ascent to be a king. And he's put on the king training regimen. How do we transform Joseph? A 17-year-old juvenile, and he's not mature. The Torah tells us that he acted a bit immaturely. How do you transform him into a king? How do you develop all that amazing potential that he has within him? At that time, Joseph, we're told, would fiddle with his hair. He's a bit childish, not ready for kingship. Maybe he didn't think about the consequences of his behavior. He slanders his brothers. He has the dreams of superiority, and he naively tells them about it. He's not ready. But he has double dreams. And it begins. It takes 13 years until it fully actualizes. But it's a 13-year long coronation. And all of his flaws are being remedied. Maybe Joseph needed to be humbled a bit. The first thing that happens is that his tunic is taken away. Joseph had a tunic fit for a king. And you know what? In our Parsha, he ends up with garments fit for a king. But he got them a bit early. The first message is, Joseph, you're not ready for this yet. Those garments are taken away. We have to go back to the drawing board. We have to go back to training camp. You will earn your royal garments. You're not quite ready. He gets to Egypt and he's given responsibility for the first time. You're in charge of Potiphar's house. You're in charge of all of Potiphar's affairs. And then he's given this very difficult test. And this too is part of the development and the maturation of Joseph. If you're going to be a king, you must have granite self-control. A king must have an iron grip on their emotions, their whims, their desires, their instincts. He's given a test, a very severe test, with the wife of Potiphar. You think about where Joseph was. A lot of people, if they were given the same treatment that Joseph had, they would fall apart. They would crumble. They would buckle. They'd be mad at the world, just angry. Joseph rises up. He doesn't allow himself to wallow in disappointment. And even once he's thrown into jail, he also rises to the top and is given more responsibility. And it's interesting. He was initially in charge of Potiphar's household. Potiphar was a minister. He had a very important role. It's a certain distinguished responsibility that Joseph had. And then he's in charge of the jail. He's overseeing criminals. Common people, not just common people, people who are accused, convicted of a crime. He's being trained to be a king, to be a selfless person who's responsible for every individual in the country. And he's being trained to care for them and to take care of them and to notice what they're going through. And he has this experience with the baker and the butler. And he's being taught something further. For 2 years, he has to remain in jail. What was going through his head during those 2 years? It's the last lesson that he needed. Joseph knew why the baker and butler were sent to jail. He knew that. He even told him. He told the butler, the reason why you were sent over here is for the purposes of getting me out. That was part of his dream interpretation for the butler, because he understood that. So the salvation comes, and then it's just pulled away from right in front of Joseph. He understood the last lesson. The last lesson is, you must rely only on God, not on the baker, not on the butler, not on Pharaoh, not on your own talents, on no one, on nothing besides for God. And indeed, once he's ready, Pharaoh says, I heard that you're a gifted dream interpreter. Biladai. Fake news. I have nothing. It's only God. Joseph has finished 13 rigorous years of preparation. Indeed, it started right when he had those double dreams, and now it's concluded. If we read the story on a superficial level, it seems like he was in darkness, and in one day, he had this unexpected, unprecedented rise to prominence. He woke up one morning. It's a morning like any other, with no hope to get himself out of his predicament. And that night, he's the viceroy. For all purposes, the most powerful man in the land. In the eyes of the Torah, and even in the eyes of Joseph, it started 13 years prior. And all the events that happened were all part of the actualization of those dreams. It's a fascinating thing. After Joseph is given the promotion, he's given a wife, Asnas, daughter of Potiphar. And he has 2 sons, Menashe and Ephraim. Why does he name his son Menashe? Menashe means to forget. So the verse tells us, he named him Menashe. This is 41:51 of Genesis. Because God made me forget all my toil and suffering and the house of my father. Now, the commentators are all trying to figure out, what does that mean? Is that an appropriate thing to forget? Is that like a thing to celebrate? To celebrate the forgetting of your household, of where you grew up, of Jacob? Is he becoming like a full Egyptian and forgetting his origin? It doesn't seem like something to celebrate. So all the commentaries, they offer different ways to explain what's happening over here. So one of the commentaries, the Malbim, he explains Joseph's naming of Menashe as almost a prophylactic. He was worried, he was fearful that he'll forget all that befell him. So he called him Menashe, which means forget, and that was to remind himself to never forget, to always remember. And others suggest that Joseph was doing the opposite. He was thanking God that he was able to overcome all that trauma and to forget to move past all that trauma. Because if someone is always living with trauma right in front of their face, and they have this visceral experience of trauma that they can't move past, they can never be productive. They can never achieve their potential. So it's almost like the opposite interpretation. Is he celebrating the forgetfulness, or is he trying to stave off the forgetfulness? And I heard from one of my teachers, Rabbi Hamnick. He suggested that maybe both of these are the same. They're really two halves of one whole. On one hand, it's important for a person to not forget their backstory, their history, where they came from, what happened to them. You have to remember where you came from and remember every step in your journey. On the other hand, it's important to not dwell and wallow in them if that's going to stunt your advancement. And then he brought an amazing story. Amazing story. I listened to this story. The Panovich Rav, the Rabbi of Panovich. Now, Panovich was a city in Europe, but it's also a very famous yeshiva in Israel. And it was founded by the Rabbi of Panovich, a legendary figure. And he said about himself that if you knew what kind of traumas I endured during the Holocaust, I should have just been someone who's just not productive at all. I should have been a total mess of a human. I should have been someone who just, like a crazy person, starts throwing rocks on street corners. I did want to throw rocks. I did want to assemble rocks. I did want to manipulate rocks. And instead of acting like a crazy person just throwing them, I decided to assemble all those rocks, to take all of my trauma and to use it to build the magnificent edifice of the great yeshiva, the great Panovich yeshiva. Our trauma can be debilitating. And maybe both of these interpretations, Joseph is saying, on one hand, I'm forgetting it, meaning it's not going to stunt my advancement. It's not going to stifle my growth. On the other hand, I'm going to remember it. I'm going to use it to spur myself forward. Joseph is remarkable in how he treats his brothers. He doesn't seek revenge. Some suggest that the reason why he got all the Egyptians to circumcise as a condition, as a precondition for food, is because he didn't want his brothers to be the only anatomically odd members of Egypt. He knew that his family's coming down. His brothers will not be the only circumcised men in the sauna. Everyone's going to be circumcised. They won't feel like outsiders. And next Parsha we learned that after everyone paid for all their food and they had nothing left to offer, Joseph said, okay, I'm going to take your land for food, but I'm going to resettle you. And he did this mass resettlement project of all the people in Egypt. And Osiris tells us the reason why he did that is that way everyone feels a bit like an outsider. And when true outsiders arrive, when his brothers arrive, no one will say you're an outsider, because an outsider doesn't say you're an outsider to another outsider. If everyone's outsiders, the brothers will have a little bit easier time acclimating to their new home. Why was Joseph so magnanimous, so forgiving, so kind and gentle towards his brothers? Joseph himself tells us, it wasn't you who did it. This was all by God. He told it to his brothers initially, Nesh's Parsha, when he reveals himself to his brothers. And then at the end of the story, after Jacob dies, he repeats it. Joseph understood that it was God who led him every step of the way. God gave him 2 dreams, and God immediately implemented those dreams, and it started. Joseph's reign started in a pit teeming with snakes and scorpions. I think the lesson is a very powerful one for us. It's not likely that our story will match Joseph's story, item for item, bit for bit, beat for beat. But we all are on some sort of journey. We all have a destiny. There's a plan for all of us. And Joseph shows us a perspective that God's plan, it could be a very long plan for you. And there'll be lots of twists and turns along the way. We're all destined for big things. There's no way the Almighty will create someone who's so talented and sharp and clever to know to listen to the Parsha podcast and to listen all the way to the end. There's no one that they might create to be mediocre. No, it's not possible. If you're listening to my words right now, it's definitely, listen, if you dropped off a half hour ago, God bless you. Only the really, really special ones stay to the end. So if you're one of those people, they might create you to be mediocre. It's not possible. So there's a plan for you. There's 2 dreams. Maybe you didn't remember them, but it's a plan. And it's being implemented and orchestrated by God. And you probably don't know what's happening. Just how could you? At the time, it's very hard to appreciate it. Our journey will not be as adventurous as Joseph's, in all likelihood. But we have to realize the story of Joseph shows us when the Almighty wants greatness out of a person, He will position that person to achieve it. Give him the opportunity to do so. And put him on that regimen to actualize that greatness. And that regimen sometimes is not pleasant. The righteous one has to fall 7 times. Either literally or metaphorically, in some way, before he can rise. It's not fun to know that our path is laden with all sorts of bumps. We wish we could just have it all. But you want to be something big, something great, it's going to be a long process. You want to build a teepee. I like to say this. You build a teepee, it's easy. Do it in the afternoon. Not a lot of debris. The bigger the project, the longer it takes, and the more debris comes along with it. Please God, we hope that we're a big project. And therefore we got to trust God. Got to trust God. Biladai, it's not me. It's not me. It's all God. It's all God. It's not me. I have nothing in this. And stay true to the path that God put us on. May we all be so fortunate as to achieve our destiny, achieve our potential, achieve the great things that the Mighty surely has in store and in plan for us. I appreciate you listening to this edition of the Parsha Podcast, this special Hanukkah edition of the Parsha Podcast. I'm actually not sitting in the Torch Center for the first time. I'm still in Houston, Texas, but I'm not in the Torch Center. And the reason why is because we're recording this on torchzoom.com at 6 p.m. Central, and I had to light the Hanukkah menorah at 5:55. So I wasn't able to get to the Torch Center. But I'm still in Houston, Texas, and my heart is still the Torch Center. And I mentioned this many years ago, that just like whenever the president's on a plane, it's always called Air Force One, even if it's not the actual Air Force One. Wherever we're recording, okay, wherever the Parsha Podcast is recording, that's like a mobile Torch Center. So I guess I am speaking to you from the Torch Center, or from a Torch Center in Houston, Texas. Have a wonderful day. Have an amazing, uplifting, powerful, illuminating festival of Hanukkah. This is a special Shabbos, a rarity, because it's also Shabbos, and also Hanukkah, and also Rosh Chodesh. And that means that in Shul, that I'm going to take out not only 1 Torah scroll, not only 2 Torah scrolls, but 3 Torah scrolls. 1 for Shabbos reading, 1 for Hanukkah reading, and 1 for Rosh Chodesh reading. It's a special opportunity. The Torah is being opened to us. It's being opened to us. The menorah is lit, and the Torah is open, and hopefully we can absorb a lot of that light and make something of this festival that lasts and endures. Have a wonderful Shabbos. It's a special Shabbos. Have a wonderful rest of your festival. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, we'll gather together again in good health and in great spirits for another edition of the Parsha Podcast. From the Torch Center, Houston, Texas, next week, please God, my email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.